To begin the saggy sweatshirt, we're going to go ahead and pick up our 15mm knitting needles and a ball of the Woolies Thick and Quick in whatever color you want. Right now I'm using gray marble. We're going to start by making the front panel, and you will have to repeat this twice to make the front and the back panel. But we're going to go ahead and do a double two-tail cast-on method. To do the two-tail cast-on method, you want to create a slip knot that has a tail of about 70 inches for the medium size, and that's casting on 40 total stitches. The length of the tail will be different for each different size you use depending on how many stitches, and that'll be in the written pattern on my blog, which will be free also. So I've created a slip knot, and I'm going to insert my hook. I'm going to go pretty quick through this because this isn't a specific two-tail cast-on method tutorial, but I'll show you quickly how I do it. The slip knot counts as your first stitch, and you're going to go in with your two fingers in between the yarn and create kind of a pointer finger thumb thing going on. The yarn closest to you should be the tail, and the yarn farther away should be attached to the ball. So I'll show you that again. I'm going to go into the middle and secure the two tails with my ring and pinky finger. I'm going to go under the first loop and under the second to create a hole and place it on my hook or my needle. I'll show you that a couple more times slowly before I just zoom through this. So you're going to grab the two tails and then secure it with your fingers. You're going to go under, over, pull through, and secure. And you don't want these too tight. This is the bottom where the ribbing's going to be. This cast-on method's really good for ribbing because it's super stretchy, but you don't want to pull it too tight. So there I have 4 stitches, and I need 36 more. So I'm just going to go ahead and power through those, and if you need any more help, there's some great videos on YouTube to do that. We are now going to do 4 rows of ribbing, and we're working our front panel bottom up. So this is going to be the bottom ribbing, and we are going to be working half twisted ribbing, and I'll show you how to do that now. I'm going to be working in English knitting whenever I am demonstrating things to you, but whenever I'm just kind of going, it'll be in continental so I can do it faster. So to start, the first row will be consisting of 1 by 1 half twisted rib. And whenever you start, you want to make sure you're not knitting with the tail, so get that out of the way. We're going to begin with 1 knit, place the yarn in front, 1 half twisted purl. So that is achieved by working through the back loop and working a purl. Move the yarn to the back, and you're going to be working 1 knit. So I'll show you that half twisted purl again. You go instead of going through the front, which you normally would do, you're going to go through the back. It may seem intimidating, but it's really not that difficult once you get the hang of it. You might just have to watch me do it a couple times. So to do the half twisted purl, you want to move the yarn to the front of your work, go through the back, and then complete a purl. Then move your yarn to the back, work a knit, and then work a half twisted purl. So I'm going to jump off camera and finish this row, and then I'll show you the second row of the 2-row repeat. Oh, I just did a regular. Oh, okay. Yeah, I will be right back. So I've just completed my first row of half twisted rib, and it ends in a half twisted pearl. So now we're going to begin the second row, and once you've learned the first and second row, you just have to repeat that once more for a total of 4 rows of ribbing. So to complete the second row of the pattern repeat, you're going to start with a half twisted knit. To complete this, you're going to insert into the back of the stitch instead of the front. So we're going to the back of the stitch, yarning over, and pulling through. And it might be a little tricky just because it's on the end, but the next one will be much easier. We're going to do a normal purl, move our yarn backwards, and then we're going to do a half twisted knit. So you're going into, it might help too, sometimes I do this to look at the back of the needle, flip it forward. We're going to go right into the back and complete a half twisted knit. I'll show you that one more time. I'm going to do a regular purl, and then we're going to complete a half twisted knit. Ooh. So I'm going to go ahead and complete this row, and I'm actually going to complete the rest of the 4 rows of ribbing. And as you can see, the half twisted knits and half twisted purls creates a braided pattern, which will be more evident after you've completed 4 rows. So I'll see you back here after you've completed 4 rows. I've now completed my 4 rows of half twisted rib, and as you can see, it really gets this braided pattern that I think is beautiful. If you find this too difficult for your skill level, go ahead and just work a 1x1 rib if you're comfortable with that. And now we're going to move on to the body of the front panel. And so essentially the entire panel is worked in stockinette stitch, which is just alternating knit row, purl row, knit row, purl row. For a size medium, we're going to work an additional 42 rows. It'll be definite in the pattern. I can even link it down below right here. Yeah, so I believe it's 42 rows, and then we're actually going to be switching to a 9mm knitting needle just because you need more support on the shoulder whenever you're working with a bulky yarn on a looser knitting needle. So I'll show you how to do that after we complete the majority of the panel. But so we want the stockinette stitch right side to be on the same side as the braid of the half twisted rib. So this is the knit side and this is the purl side. So we're actually going to start on a purl row because we are going to be working along this side and this is the wrong side. So this is how you'll complete all your purl rows. You're just going to work a purl into every stitch. So after you finish the first purl row, and I'm sliding off the end here, you're just going to flip and then work 1 knit row. And then you're just going to repeat 1 knit row, 1 purl row, 1 knit row, 1 purl row until you have reached 46 total rows. And then that is when you'll begin to switch to the smaller needles. So I'm going to go ahead and pop off camera and work those 46 rows. If you need help with knits or purls, again, there are great videos on YouTube that'll show you how to. They're the 2 basic stitches, and they work up the stockinette stitch. So I will see you back here in 46 total rows. Before I do anything else, I just want to share that I changed to circular needles. That's why they're blue instead of gray. It really doesn't make any difference. I'm just more comfortable with them. So now we're going to create the shoulder support. I've completed 46 total rows. And please reference the pattern to get your exact number of rows you need to complete. And so we're going to be switching to 9mm hooks, which will create less of an opportunity for it to stretch over your shoulder. And so I need to transfer 40 stitches on a 15mm hook or needle to 46 on a 9mm. And I'll show you how I'm going to do this. It's going to be different for each size, so please again check the pattern. So to begin, I'm going to purl 2. Then I'm going to purl another 6. So I actually only purled 5, and on the 6th I'm going to increase. And to increase, I'm going to purl, and without removing it from my left hook, I'm going to purl back into the back of the stitch. And that creates 2 instead of 1. So now I'm going to purl another 5. And then increase on the 6th. Purl another 5. And then increase, and I'll do this one slow. So you purl normally, and then before removing the loop off the left needle, you're going to purl back into the back loop. And then remove it, and that creates 2 stitches. So another 5. And then increase on the 6th. And again, please, if you are making a different size, reference the pattern on my blog. It's completely free, and it'll tell you what you need to be doing. So I lost count, and I'll show you how to find your place. So, okay. Here you can see that there is a smaller bump than the purls, and if you flip it over, you can really tell that this is a new created stitch. So this was my last increase, so I've done 4. So this is my 5th of the set. And then I'm gonna increase on the 6th. I split the yarn on this one, so I'm going to do that again. Okay. My last increase, and then I should have 2 left because I started with 2, and I'll make the math nice for every size. You'll have the same number left that you started with, unless it's impossible, then that'll also be written out in the pattern too. So now I'm going to work 5 more rows and double check your size to see how many you have to work, and then I'll show you how we're going to cast off. And just work these last rows normally how you were working stockinette on the larger needles. So I actually completed 4 additional rows, and I'm casting off on the 5th row. And so this is probably one of the most simple ways to cast off, and it's the same principle whether you're knitting or purling. You're going to knit 2 or purl 2, and then just pull the first loop over the second. And then you're going to knit 1 and pull the first loop over the second. So now you start by knitting 2, but then you just knit 1 and keep going. to begin the sleeve, we're going to cast on 16 using the two-tailed cast on method. So pull a long enough tail and you're going to cast on 16. So your tail will be much shorter than for the body, but you still want it to be decently long so you have enough. And just like on the body panels, you're going to work how I explained before. So I am going to cut my excess tail because I overestimated, I guess. And now we're going to do 4 rows of half twisted rib. And we start this with a knit and then a half twisted purl. And this is exactly the same what we did on the body panels. So I'm gonna go quicker through this because I've explained it already, but if you need further explanation, you can go back to the beginning of the video and just check that out, or Google or YouTube another video. But so I'm going to do 4 rows of half twisted rib, and as you remember, or hopefully remember, the first row is knitting and then half twisted purl, and then the next row is half twisted knit and regular purl. So I'll be back at the end of 4 rows. So I've completed the 4 rows of half twisted rib and did an additional row of just all purl to get me to the place where I want to explain. So sleeves are trickier and will be different for every single size. Please reference the written pattern. For this one, for the medium size that I'm working on now, the sleeve begins with the purl 1 row and then the sets of increases. So I need to increase a total of 14 stitches, but in each increase row I do 2 stitches, so that's 7 increase rows over I need to have like 38 rows, so the closest thing to that is 5 sets of 7 and then 2 to 3 rows at the end. If that doesn't make sense, that's completely okay. I tell you everything and how to do it in the pattern, but I will now show you how I'm going to begin this first set. So this will be my first set of 5. When I say set of 5, I mean the first row is an increase row and then 4 regular rows. So that creates 5. So I'm going to knit 2, and then I'm going to do a knit increase. And it's the same way we did the purl. And now I'm going to knit until I have 3 stitches left in this row. But if you're working on even, it'll be all knit or all purl. So I have 3 stitches left, so now I'm going to do an increase. So knit regularly, and without removing the loop from the left, go back into the back of the stitch and you've just created a stitch. So that was our first increase row. Oops. And now I'm going to work 4 more regular rows and then keep working these sets. So I want to also give you a tip. I like to, this was from my previous sleeve, I like to keep track of what I'm doing. So here you can see 7 sets of 5 and then an additional row at the end. I do 5 and then box it off, and I can see when I have 7 boxes I have completed my sleeve. So that's my tip for you. If you want to do that, it'll help you keep track of where you are. But I'm going to go ahead and work on my sets and meet you back here whenever I'm ready to add 1 or 2 additional rows at the end. So I've completed my sleeve according to the pattern. I've completed my 7 sets of 5 and I added 3 rows at the end. So that gets me to a total of 43 rows, and I'm about to cast off on the 44th row. And so this is how I'm going to cast off on a knit side. Like I said before, you just purl or knit 2 depending on which side you're on, and then pull the second loop over the first. Now, if you are just making a sweater and you don't want the hood, you're done making components of the actual work, but if you do want a hood, I'm going to show you how to make that right after this. But that should be the quickest part of the sweater. When I'm working, I usually try to go front panels and then sleeves, basically working my way down from most time consuming to least time consuming. Okay, and the last one we just pull a tail, cut it, and pull through. Now let's move on to the hood. To begin the hood, I am going to cast on 40 stitches on my 15mm hook. And to cast on now, we're using a different, I believe it's the knitted cast on method, but you're going to insert into the slip knot, yarn over, pull through, and then twist and place it back onto your needle. And for the rest of the stitches, you're going to go through the two. You're not going into any stitch, you're going in between the two stitches, excuse me, pulling through, twisting, and putting back on. You might have to readjust, while you only have a few stitches on the hook, the slip knot might rustle around and you just might have to adjust it. But that's completely okay. Also make sure that you're doing these fairly loose. You have to be able to knit into them, obviously, whenever you're done casting on. So if they're too tight, you're going to have a miserable time on the first row. So I'm just going to cast on 40 and then I will be right back. I've casted on, I have 40 cast on my needles, and I'm just going to work in stockinette stitch. So I'm going to knit the first row, purl the next row, knit, purl, and we are going to do this until, for a size medium, until the hood is, well, we want the hood to be a total of 13.5, but we're working from the top of the hood back down to the bottom, and since we ended on the 9mm, we're going to have to adjust this again. So we're going to work until this is about 12.5, and then we'll do an inch of the 9mm. The pattern will tell you the exact amount of rows to do, and I will too whenever I get back. I haven't made the hood yet, so this is new to me also, but I will come back after working whatever amount of rows, and I will show you how we will adjust back to the 9mm and how to cast off. So again, we're just working how we did the front panel. There's going to be no increases or decreases. You're just working stockinette stitch, which is knits and purls. So one row of knit, one row of purl, one row of knit, one row of purl. So I will see you back here whenever I'm ready to go to my 9mm needles. I realized I made a mistake and had to frog a bit. I want to show you that at the beginnings, the first 2 stitches and the last 2 stitches of every row for the hood, you have to knit no matter what. This is because, let me see. This is because stockinette stitch curls at the sides and at the top, so we want to counteract that. So I'll show you here. We're getting towards the end of a row. So it is stockinette stitch, except at the beginning and in the end, you're always doing knit. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm on a purl row right now. So it only matters when you're on a purl row. On a knit row, you're going to be knitting regardless. But And 2 stitches should be enough. That's about an inch on the 15 millimeter. So I'm yarning backwards and I'm going to knit these last 2 stitches. So I just wanted to show you guys that. So it's going to create the garter stitch on the ends. Okay, so I've completed 2 rows. I did some math and I think it'll be 29 rows to be 12 and a half. So I will meet you back here when I get to that point. Okay, so I'm going to breeze through the hood because it's essentially the same as the decreases on the body. Okay, so I'm going to do my 2 knits. And then I'm going to purl 5. And then on the 6th, I'll increase. So this is exactly the same as I showed you on the body. After this increase row, I'm going to do 3 more rows and then cast off on the next row. So it's going to be this row plus 4 more if you count the cast off row. So I'm just going to finish the hood off camera. It's basically the same as finishing the body, so if you need any more help, look there. Thanks. Okay, we have all the parts made. Now I'm going to sew everything together. Before I started the video, I laid out where I'm going to be sewing. So the way I sew, and I think the most common way to sew things together, are to sew the 2 body panels together first, and then the sleeves, and then sew the sleeves down the body. You'll see what I mean whenever we start doing it, but I'm going to actually raise this up. Okay, so for size medium, we want an 11-inch gap. So I went ahead and laid out 2 stitch markers. Yes, one is a paper clip. For 11, these stitch markers represent the last place we're going to sew up, because inside the stitch markers is exactly 11 inches. I did this by, so there's 46 stitches at the top, so I counted 23 in from the left and 23 in from the right, and then measured out from there, and then repeated that on the other side. So now we're going to sew the right shoulder. And we barely have to sew anything here because the neck opening is so big. I also think I didn't do the right math for the conversion from 15 millimeter to 9 millimeter, but it'll be fixed in the pattern, so you don't need to worry about that. So to begin, we basically, on this stitch, are going to be recreating the V's of both of these. So you can see that this is the first stitch of this side, and this is the first stitch of this side. So first I'm going to go through the first stitch of each side. And make a knot. I'm not amazing at sewing, so this definitely could be wrong. I actually think if I go through this again, so I'm going to go through it again and pull through. That makes a knot. Okay. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to find the first stitch and go under and through, and then under the first one of this row and go under and through. It's not going to look like much at first. After you've done a couple stitches, it really looks a lot better. So now we're going to find the next one, and we're going to go under and then the next one over here. So on one side it's going to be a V, and on the other side it's going to be a V facing the other way. So you'll just have to keep it straight. And this is why I don't think I did the math right, is because I think the 15 millimeter is thicker at the bottom. So again, just look for that in the written pattern. So I'm trying to set up the sleeve before I film, and I just want to share that setting up the sleeve is probably one of the things that I find the hardest. It's definitely really tricky because if you shift it this way, then one side of the sleeve is wonky. If you shift it this way, then it's not even. So you really just want to make sure you're counting it out and that you're doing it mathematically. Otherwise, guessing or just looking at it is not really going to be the best. So I'm going to get this set up and then I'll be back. Okay, so let's talk about the setup. I find the middle of the sleeve, so if it's an even number, total stitches at the top row, you're going to have 2 middle, and if it's an odd, you're going to have 1 in the middle that you can perfectly line up to the seam that you just sewed for the shoulder. If not, you'll have the 2 right side by side in the middle. And then I attach, this one's not attached, I attach the bottom of the sleeve to the body and then I do it to the top. So let's get sewing. So sewing is the main reason why I prefer raglan sweaters to a knit and then sew sweater. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. I don't know if it's just me, but definitely for me in the sewing part. But okay, before I get going. So you're going to do the same thing that you did for the shoulder on the sleeve. But whenever you attach it to the body, you're going through the horizontal bars of... So you can see right there, this is a stitch, and these are the horizontal bars. So to get connected, I'm going in through the first stitch over here, and then the corresponding horizontal bar. And unfortunately, because it there is the 9mm rows at the top, it's going to be difficult to mathematically see where and which rows need to be together. So that's the only thing that's kind of a bummer about this, but otherwise these patterns, or this type of sweater to knit, is easier. Okay. So I'm just going to move along here and then go into the next horizontal bar. And if you complete your sleeve and it's not even, like whenever you go to fold your sleeve in half and it's not sitting evenly, then you just have to redo it. I've done that plenty of times. It's definitely a bummer, but it's something that happens, so. I just want to make sure you're able to see here. Around, whenever you get to the halfway mark, you'll know if your going to be even or not, because the stitches here will not lining up. And if you find that you are good and this is bunching up, then just move to the next horizontal bar. So like skip this one and then go to the next one in order for it to sit evenly. And if it's not perfect, it's not perfect. It's a handmade item. The best part about it is that you made it and you can take pride in it. So that's what I tell myself. Okay. So I skipped a couple horizontal bars there and it looks like I'm back on track there. Because the height of the stockinette stitch, or the knit stitch I guess, isn't the same as the width. So you're going to have to, unless you knit a perfectly square knit stitch, which I don't think anyone does, you're going to have to skip a couple horizontal bars. And so right here I skipped one when I shouldn't have, so just working back to fix it. And you can see that it's coming together nicely. I can tell I'm doing it right because all of these stitches are in the same row. If I had one that was pinched down and it was this next row, that means I did the wrong horizontal bar, if that makes sense. So right now I can tell I'm doing it correctly because I'm not bunching up weirdly at the middle point, so I can take confidence in that. But also, once you get to the 9mm, you're definitely going to have to skip a good amount of bars. Like, I think I'm skipping 3 right now. We are in the home stretch now. We only have to sew up the sleeves and down the body on both sides and then sew on the hood. Before you close the sleeves, I would add both sleeves to the work first. That's just my suggestion. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab some yarn, be right back. So sewing up the sleeve and the side is definitely the longest stretch of sewing, and it changes. Well, it doesn't change as much because of the design of this, but you're going to start at this. You're going to start at the sleeve, and so you're going to close it. And something that's tricky about stockinette is that it curls under, So you want to make sure that you're uncurling it and going into the right horizontal bar every time. So we're going to start with the ribbing, and we're just going to connect the two edges. And my yarn's pretty long, but I might have to add on to it. That's not a big problem at all. Just tie a knot or just secure it and then add more. So I'm gonna knot this. And essentially we've gone through all the techniques we need. It's just a horizontal seam stitch all the way because we're connecting stockinette stitch along the whole way. So okay, I finished my sleeve and I'm at the armpit. So now the most important thing is to make sure that your bottoms are lined up. Starting with this first stitch because it's going to not make or break you. You can always readjust, but it's really going to help you align the sides better. So to the best of my ability, I'm going to go into the first horizontal bar under the sleeves in the armpit. And I'm just using the string that I was using to sew the arm. And so I'm just going to keep following down. And as you can see, my sleeve is okay and the armpit is okay. If you have holes in your armpits, you can always go back and fix that after you've finished sewing the side. So I'm just going to work my way down the body, and that is going to be how you complete the underarm and body, and you'll just have to do that again on the other side. And once you're done with that, all you have to do now is sew the hood on. So I'll meet you back here whenever I've completed sewing this together. So again, I did the math wrong for the hood, so it's actually not gonna connect here, but it's gonna connect closer to the shoulder seams, which I'm okay with. In the pattern, I'll definitely have it connect at the base of the neck. I don't know, I guess this is equivalent to like cutting your hoodie, so I'm just gonna go with it. So this is how I set it up. I matched the middle of the hood to the middle of the back, and then folded these over, and then I'm gonna sew how we sewed the shoulder seams. So it's exactly like that, and I'm just gonna fast forward through it and show you guys the finished product. And then we're gonna whip stitch the top, and I'll show you that. Hey guys, so my phone ran out of data or space as I was filming this, and so just really quickly to do the hood, I would just continued all the way around the neck in the same stitch we used for the shoulders, and then to sew the top, I used the same stitch also. I didn't use whip stitch, so I just wanted to let you guys know that it's written all out in the pattern. But thanks for watching. Sorry that it cut off. I hope you have a great time making this. I know I did.